So I will start my presentation with focusing on the India economy and power sector, which is basically the main rationale why you should consider OPG as part of your portfolio. And you might know that India surpassed last year in terms of GDP growth China. So it is officially fastest growing economy in the world. And behind this GDP growth, obviously, there is demand for power. Even though the country is the third largest producer and in terms of consumption in total, the consumption per capita is one of the lowest amongst developing countries and much lower than average in the world. So it was just around 1,000 kilowatt hours per capita versus almost 3,000 on average in the world, far behind another big country called China, which is 3,700 kilowatt hours, and far behind developed countries, which are several times, up to 10 times higher. So what does it say? Obviously, this is the industry which is bound to grow, with population being around 1.3 billion people and GDP growing around 7% a year. We should expect, obviously, some re-rating in terms of consumption. Also, there is a clear correlation between growth in demand for power and GDP growth. You can see in this last 5-6 years that that was the case. And everyone is expecting that the growth for power is going to grow to be around 6.7% up to 2022. And also, there is a number of drivers in Indian economy behind this robust growth in power generation. Indian government is working really hard to provide power for all on 24/7 basis. There is still quite a lot of households, up to 300 million people without access to power. Recently, the government made significant progress, but it is very basic supply of power. If they put one bulb in the house, they consider this to be electrification. But actually, this is not far behind what is supposed to be proper electrification. So there is a big drive to continue in terms of industrialization and urbanization, young population moving from rural areas to the cities. There is very ambitious targets to provide housing for all scheme, and also mobility in terms of electric vehicles is on top of agenda of Indian government. You might have heard that they have very ambitious goal to have 100% electric vehicles by 2030, which is a very admirable and ambitious goal. And obviously, the drive behind infrastructure requirements, railways, infrastructure, this all creates very good background for our industry. So let's talk about OPG. Company got listed in 2008, and as you can see from this chart, it delivered in terms of growth of capacity pretty much consistently, and we reached 714 megawatt installed capacity a couple of years ago. Then we've reduced our capacity by deconsolidating our Gujarat plant, which was 300 megawatt, and I'm going to talk about this in more details later. But last year, we've added 62 megawatt solar projects in Karnataka. But the crown jewel in our group is 414 megawatt plant in southern India, in Tamil Nadu. There are 4 units, and it's been generating for the last several years and with very high plant load factor. But we also added 62 megawatt of solar projects last year. So we have a portfolio of thermal power plants, which is Tamil Nadu, and renewable energy, which is Karnataka. This is just timeline of the history of the company. Again, it got listed on AIM in 2008 with just a very small plant, 20 megawatt gas-based power plant. the company raised some funds on AIM and funded construction of 4 units in Tamil Nadu from 2010 to 2015. So there are 4 units which have been operating since that time. And in 2016, the company also commissioned 300 megawatt, 2 units, 150 megawatt each in Gujarat. And in 2018, we've delivered solar projects, 4 different sites, solar projects, which gave us this diversification to renewable energy. So the company, interestingly enough, operates all the assets, but also construction in terms of EPC, in terms of management, sale, marketing, distribution. It's all done by the company. So we are capturing full value of the cycle, and the construction was delivered within the timeline which was specified, and at a reasonable capex per megawatt in comparison with other peers. At the core of OPG strategy, we have so-called group captive model. And I will explain it in very simple terms, but during the break, I can explain more details if you have more questions. Basically, power in India is supplied at some regulated state tariffs. And for different groups of customers, there are different tariffs. So you can see that at the bottom of this pyramid of tariffs, there are people like farmers, and they are getting power for free. And state distribution companies, they are charging higher tariff for industrial customers at the top of the pyramid and effectively subsidize the lower paying groups of customers. We come to top paying industrial commercial customers, and we offer them, first of all, reliable supply of power on 24/7 basis, and we offer them a discount to state-regulated tariff at around 10–15%. And they sign up with us on the long-term contracts. We typically have 3 years rolling contracts. And they become shareholders in our Indian SPVs, but they're not after equity returns. They are getting a reliable supply of power from us at attractive tariffs, and we are getting credit-worthy, good-paying customers. So we currently have around 200 industrial customers following this model. So we are able to charge them effectively a premium tariff, which is attractive for the customers, but at the same time, they're sticking with us for a period of several years under long-term contracts. So we have quite a good diversification of customers in terms of industries. From this diagram, you can see that we have textile is majority of our customers, but we also have foundry, steel, chemicals, automobile, and we don't have reliance on some large customers. We have 200 customers, different size, small to large, but we effectively have payment cycle around 45–50 days, so the collectibility is not an issue. But also we have good business customers who are obviously working with us because we provide attractive tariffs, and they are willing to stay with us at multi-year contracts, which are rolled over every year. What is extremely important for us is the culture of safety and environmental performance. So our plants in Tamil Nadu were built in such a way that we have boilers which can blend different types of coal. The plant is very close to the port, so we have 95% of our coal coming from imported sources, primarily from Indonesia. But we are able to take coal from South Africa, Australia, from Indian sources, and we can blend them in most efficient way for us. But what it helps to us, we can regulate actually CO2 emissions and some other emissions because of different types of coal. And we have also reduced water consumption at our plants because we use air cooling systems for our generators. So we consume actually just 1% of water, and we recycle water in comparison with a typical plant which would use water for cooling down the generators. Also, we are in compliance with all the environmental standards, and we have culture of internal standards exceeding the Ministry of Environment standards. And as you can see from our safety records, we have very great statistics. We had 0 near zero and zero current year safety reportable incidents. So we take it very seriously, and anyone who comes to visit our plant, and we have some of our shareholders coming to see, it's a very green plant, a lot of trees. We put a lot of emphasis on working with local communities. So last time when I presented, we obviously were during the year, our financial year from April to March. So we just finished our year FY19, which is year to March 19, and we have not published annual results, audited numbers, which will be coming in July, and very exciting because we are just a few weeks away from announcing the results. But operational results we've published in our trading update, and I can report to you that we had 2.7 terawatt hours of generation. Our tariff was around 5.4 rupees. In terms of GBPs, it would be around 6 pence per kilowatt hour. And during the year, we managed to increase our tariffs by around 10% through direct negotiations with our customers. Also, in our contracts, we have a formula which links us to state-regulated tariff. So whenever the local state distribution company is going to change their tariff, we will benefit from this increase. So over the last several years, there was no increase in state-regulated tariffs. So we expect that this year there might be another increase in state-regulated tariffs, and we also can benefit from this. Our plant load factor was around 75%. Plant load factor is effectively a utilization of our assets, and it is very important KPI. Just to give you a comparison, our peers, Indian power generation companies, have on average around 59% plant load factor. We have 75%, and it was supposed to be higher, but one of four units was shut down for 3 months. We did some repair and maintenance, so it was 75%, which is still a very good result. And our gross debt was around 80 million pounds. Our broker, Tsvetkov, is projecting that for the year to March 19, our EBITDA is going to be around 34 million pounds. So you can see that our debt to EBITDA ratio for previous year was probably around 2.5. For the current year, which is year to March 20, EBITDA is projected by Tsvetkov around 41 million pounds. So we have 2 to 1 debt to EBITDA ratio, which is very healthy, and I'll be talking about this a little bit later. This is just some statistics from previous year. You can see that our generation was consistently increasing year-on-year basis, and we achieved, in terms of total generation, around 2.5 terawatt hours, and 2.2 terawatt hours was dim generation. And PLF factor was 73% 3 years ago, 73% 3 years ago, and 75% in FY19. The current year, again, our target is to be around 80% plus plant load factor. Our debt is being repaid consistently. So current year, we had repaid around 20.6 million pounds of term loans, and 80 million is comprised of 70 million term loans debt, which are long-term debt obtained to build the plant, and 10 million working capital loans. First unit, Unit 1, was completely repaid from December 18, and the remaining 3 units will be fully repaid by 2023. So in 4.5 years' time, this company will be generating around more than 40 million pounds EBITDA without any significant debt, which is pretty much amazing in terms of future life of this plant for another 30-40 years. You have a huge cash generative asset without any servicing of debt or repayment of debt. In terms of revenues, obviously, we can talk about historical numbers at this moment. We had 140 million pounds revenue last year, and for the current year, Tsvetkov is projecting to be revenue at similar level. And on half-year results, we had 78 million revenue, but it will be around 140 million for full year. And our EBITDA, I mentioned 34 million pounds for this year. At half year, it was 14. But you can see that in 2017, we had EBITDA more than 50 million pounds. So when I'm talking about, our broker is talking about 41 million EBITDA for the current year, it's not something which we haven't achieved. And it is a direct function of few variables. One of them is obviously tariffs, which have been increased last year, and coal price. And coal price has been softening, and also I will be talking about this. We've managed to lock into some fixed price contracts. And obviously we had profit 2 years ago. Last year was a year when we deconsolidated Gujarat plant, and we took some significant impairment write-downs to effectively focus on Chennai plant. And we are expecting, obviously, profitability for the current year and the ongoing forward basis. The key variable in our business is coal price. As I mentioned earlier, 95% of our coal needs are coming from overseas sources, and particularly from Indonesia. This is a graph, spot price for our type of coal, 4200 GAR, which is lower quality grade coal, but on per unit of output basis, it proves to be the most cost efficient. So you can see 3 years ago, cost of coal was under $30 per metric ton. Then last year, coal price was up to $50, which was particularly because of the actions of Chinese, and they destabilized the market. And since that, coal price has been trending down. We always believe that coal price should be going down given the trends for the world becoming less carbon and more greener. And also, it is still quite volatile, but you can see that last year we had average coal price around $44 per metric ton. Sorry, it was 2 years ago. Last year it was just under 39, and this year it's trending down. On top of this, we listened to our shareholders who wanted us to eliminate volatility from our results, and we managed to obtain fixed price coal contracts for 60% of our capacity for the current year. So to year March 20, we effectively locked in the profit. And we also set up ourselves for trading with financial instruments, so we are able to take advantage of swaps at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So if previously we were getting some criticism for not being a boring power generation company which is exposed to coal prices, this time I can proudly say that we've addressed this issue. It was hard work because for our type of coal, it's difficult to get fixed price contracts, but we managed to achieve it. So what are our main priorities? First of all, maximize cash flow from existing assets. And I mentioned to you that we had already 75% PLF, which is much higher than the current, than our peers. And we are targeting for this year to be more than 80% planned load factor. We had increase in tariffs last year during the year. So this year, FY20, will benefit from full year of higher tariffs. And also, we have potentially an upside from state-regulated tariffs being increased. And we managed to hedge 60% of our coal requirements. So we have much better visibility in terms of our results for the current year. Safety and environmental performance is very critical, as I mentioned earlier. And in terms of being our objectives, we want to deleverage the company. We are repaying around 20 million pounds of term loans, which saves us around 2 million pounds on interest costs. So it's straight 22 million in terms of creation equity value for the shareholders. And the company will repay this scheduled term loans in next 4.5 years by 2023. And we paid dividends over the last 2 years. 2 years ago, we paid just under 1p per share dividend. Last year, we paid the scrip dividend, 1p per share, which was actually very well perceived by the market because when it was converted into shares, it became around 9% dividend yield. And obviously, the board will make decision about the dividends and going forward our dividend policy based on the audited financial results, which are coming in July. And I promised to talk about Gujarat plant. So you can see this is share price performance over the last 3 years. And we have to be very honest about this. The company was trading around 90p and even around £1 just 3 years ago. But Gujarat plant followed exactly the same model as our Chennai plant, which is group captive model. But local authorities, they took a different view and different interpretation of the laws. And they didn't recognize group captive status of our Gujarat plant. And this created quite a lot of stress because they were effectively withholding 1/3 of our tariffs from the invoices. The company chose a way to negotiate with the state, and it was resolved, but unfortunately, the cash stress already happened because 75% of funding came from debt, and they are charging very high interest, around 13%, 13.25% interest. So what we decided last year, that we will focus on cash generative, very profitable operations of Chennai, and we deconsolidate our plant. We gave it to the banks to go through the resolution plan process. We still have 46% our equity interest in Gujarat plant, but we made cautionary provisions pretty much for all investments. And this created, obviously, quite a bit of stress in the market when market couldn't understand what's happening, why the group is having so much issues with Gujarat. And there was a concern that debt of Gujarat plant is going to obviously cripple the whole group. It wasn't the case because Gujarat plant debt was ring-fenced to the Gujarat SPV. So we've deconsolidated Gujarat. And in November, we've announced half-year results. Our share price increased more than 100%. We are currently trading at around 18p. Just to give you a perspective, typically in our industry, we get multiples around 8-9 times EBITDA. If we take conservative 8 times and apply it to our projected EBITDA for the current year, again, around conservative 40 million pounds, our enterprise value should be around 320 million pounds. Minus 80 million debt, so the company should be trading at around 240 million pounds. We are trading under 80 million pounds. So there is a clearly big disconnect between the fundamental value of the company and the current market cap. And this happened, obviously, because of the issues with Gujarat plant. But now we are focusing on Chennai operations of very profitable and cash generative. We have debt, which is at very reasonable level, around 2 to 1 on debt to EBITDA basis. And we have a much significant upside for our shareholders. So when we announce our results in July, obviously, we'll get some validation of the story and our strategy. And on a going forward basis, with locked-in profitability, with fixed price contracts and increased tariff, I think this year is going to be very exciting for the company and for everyone else because we are trading currently at 30% or less of our fundamental value. So that's, I think, a unique situation for potential new investors. 52, this is our shareholding structure. 52% is owned by directors, but 51.5% is owned by Mr. Arvind Gupta, who is our executive chairman, and he's the founder of the company. Him and his family own 51.5%. And we have very patient and supportive long-standing shareholders. M&G owns 13%, Rivier Mercantile just under 5%, Premier under 4%, and British Steel Pension Fund under 3.6%. We have retail shareholders around 14-16%. We would love to increase our retail shareholder base, and we are working really hard on it. And without further ado, I would like to answer your questions if you have any.
Dmitri, that was super, very clear. Thank you very much indeed. Do you have any questions, please? Gentleman over here, Peter? Or Chris?
Hi, thanks for that presentation. A quick question. Is your debt in local currency or in US dollars?
Yeah, very good question. It's in local currency, so it's in rupees. We convert for convenience to GBP because this is our reporting currency.
Thanks.
And who's that debt held with? Is it local banks?
With the local banks.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And on the debt, the way you've been paying it down is very impressive. But the obvious question is, A, what rates are you paying on it? And B, is it a time to borrow more? Are markets favourable to gain more debt and increase capacity?
So we are paying just under 11% in rupee terms. And the strategy for the company is to deleverage. As you can clearly see, we are paying down around 20 million every year, which saves us a lot of interest costs, around 2 million on annual basis. And this 22 million goes straight to equity value because we are paying down, we're reducing leverage, so we are obviously creating equity value. So at this moment, our focus is to reduce this massive discount between fundamental value of the company and the market cap. So if and when we have good projects which require some additional funding, we will consider them very carefully. But our main objective is to have a very strong balance sheet, restore the confidence of the market, because obviously we need to restore after the Gujarat story, and to keep leverage at very reasonable level and to hopefully become debt-free or at very low leverage ratio in 3 years' time.
And the other question I had was around the plant load factor. You said it was been 75%, your ambition was to get to 80%. Supposing you can increase that or increase it further in the future, is there already demand? Is it already sold? If you're increasing that supply, are there customers there to take it?
We already sold out. We have 200 customers, and we pretty much sold out our capacity. But depending on the needs, the customers can offtake, and they nominate every month amount which they offtake. And it could be less, it could be higher, within reasonable, obviously, limits. So it is pretty much predictable, but there is some variability. There is seasonal factor. For example, now it's the hottest time of the year in southern India, up to 40 degrees Celsius. But there is a lot of wind and renewable obligations coming into the place. So there is more incentives for people to consume wind during the summer. But obviously, on the other side, people need ACs. They need, obviously, more power from different sources. So there are several market factors, but 80% is not something which we have not achieved. We achieved it more than 85%. But we are managing our portfolio of clients very efficiently, so hopefully we'll be around our targets around 80%.
Okay, we have a question here, please.
So all your power is sold through long-term PPAs with your customers, 100%?
Typically 3 years PPAs. One out of 3 units actually sells power under 15 years contract to Tsvetkov, which is a Tamil Nadu state distribution company. So long-term contracts, yes.
So nothing is sold to the state grid?
Nothing. We sell to Tsvetkov 1 out of 4 units. This is a state grid, yes.
Okay.
And sometimes we have a little bit of extra capacity when customers are not off-taking, so we can sell it on exchange, but it's really small percentage.
Okay. So very little on merchant basis, effectively.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Gentleman here, please.
Hi, yeah, just a question about the future of coal. The EU have decreed that they're going to ban coal altogether by 2030. Isn't China and India going to be put under severe pressure to abandon coal also in due course? Because it is the largest cause of global warming that there is. So there's going to be increasing pressure on it to be removed at some point, isn't there?
Yeah. If you remember at the very beginning of my presentation, I said about consumption per capita. It's one of the lowest. They, in India and in China, to a large extent, they have problem with electrification, giving power to all the people. So they have ambitious targets to have more renewable power, and currently renewable is just 2% in total generation mix, and coal-fired plants around 75%. But because economy is growing at around 7% on an annual basis, there will be increase in proportionate share of renewable, but coal-fired plants will stay and will be becoming still as a backbone of economy. So by 2030, it is projected to be still 65% of total generation mix. So there are new norms in terms of emissions, and there are more strict regulations, which is going to obviously focus on CO2 and other emissions. But in terms of future coal-fired plants, they're going to be there for decades.
One last question at the back here, please.
I wonder if you could tell us a little more about the position with Gujarat. You've got 46% investment. You've got 46% investment. Do you have any management control over how that business is being run? And is it likely to turn to profit that you can actually get some value back for that 46%?
So as I've mentioned earlier, we made provisions pretty much for full investment. We have nominal value around £40,000 at investment. We took huge hit in terms of P&L last year. However, it is up to the banks to go through the restructuring process, resolution plan, because it's not the operational capacity or profitability of the plant. It is, to some extent it is, but it's also over leverage of this plant, because at 13.25% debt, pretty much all the operating earnings go to repay debt. And as I mentioned, the Gujarat authorities created quite a lot of distress due to the unfavorable interpretation of group captive status, which was resolved, completely resolved, but the stress is there. So until and unless the banks are willing to restructure the debt, which they should, there is very little value for equity holders, and that's why we've reduced, we deconsolidate the plant. In terms of operational, the plant is fully operational. It was commissioned 3 years ago, 300 megawatt, 2 units. We have group captive customers, good tariffs, but it's fully on a standalone basis. It's operated by the team. We are not involved in day-to-day operations. Sometimes we get involved in terms of discussions with the banks, but we don't have control of this plant. That's why we deconsolidated the plant. Under certain circumstances in the future, if the banks are restructuring the debt, there might be some additional value, but at this moment we made full provisions.
Okay, Dmitri, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.